Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Post-paranormal experiences that happen to you in psych wards. I'll start. Be me, in psych ward after getting harassed by the voices in my head for almost a year. Another guy is there. He's obviously enlightened, but is acting wild and stupid and crazy. So everybody else looks down on him. Singles me out. I ask him to dance. He starts beating on me. My ribs may have been cracked, bruised, or broken, but he adamantly started telling everyone that he broke my ribs. Later, as I'm going to bed, hear a nurse say out loud, "Why did you go and break the prophecy?" Same place. Been having Japanese dreams for a while, and talking in my dreams to those who still love me throughout all of this. One night, while I'm half asleep and my dreams have already started, this one girl who's a Jehovah's Witness starts talking to a guard, out loud again. She says, they talk to each other in their dreams. That's how it works. Later, voices in my head won't stop trying to pretend to be me. Eventually say something about how those voices aren't mine. Please recognize my voice as mine. To do this, say, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but actually, he thought the earth was a pear. The guy who is in charge of the psych ward and watches religious videos about channeling one's own power through the Lord, later brings in pears for everyone to eat just an hour or two later. Go up to him. 1492, huh? He just laughs and smiles.
The best was when this new guard came in out of nowhere and seemed really on edge. Someone had scribbled CIA on the wall in purple crayon, so I just said, purple CIA. Then all of a sudden, this random guy who was a guard of the facility started confessing to me, extremely nervously, about how a lot of people think there's a deep state, but actually people in those agencies have to do whatever the president says. And when the president does something bad, he will just blame the agencies as going rogue, despite being the one in control the whole time. It was so weird. Why would he look so afraid when he was telling me this?
This happened in October of 2023. Be me at home. I've been having crazy synchronicities for about a month. This usually happens when I'm in what I would call the avatar state. The numbers I see on a regular basis are 4 and 9. 4 and 9 makes 13. I also have this belief that 14 is a safe number. 15, on the other hand, is not, since that is the number of the devil in tarot. Come home from work one day and see the numbers 4 and 9 in my skylight. It's as if someone had gone up there and drawn the letters into the dew water. But it's too perfect to be a person. I begin to see threads on 4chan that I am either talking about in my condo or thinking. This more or less sets me off and I stop going to work, which triggers my job to call my mom, who takes me to the ward. Before I go to the ward, I have this feeling in my stomach like energy going in a circle. I call it battle mode because I've experienced it before. I arrive at the ward and they check me in. No one appears to be in the ward other than me and one other person, aside from the staff. There are 2 people worth mentioning who I see in the morning. Tanner, not his real name, and Katie, also not her real name. The entire time Tanner is agitated and walking around the ward at a fast pace. I have this feeling in my legs when he is around, almost like someone is trying to pop the arteries in my legs. This has never happened to me before, and it ends when Tanner eventually leaves the ward. Katie would walk around while talking under her breath. She would mention my numbers. She mentions the numbers 13 and that I should go to 15. I don't react, but it's almost like they were trying to goad me into doing something. I see Katie in front of the group room and she mentions something about going to 15 again. And as she says, it's the first part of the lullaby music plays, the go to sleep part, over the loudspeaker. I just stand and stare at her. It happens her second time later on in the day. Aside from the 2 people in the group room, there is a picture that someone drew. It's a picture of a spiral surrounded by 9 circles. Also, every time I've been to the psych ward, my tag ends in the number 666.
I have heaps of psych ward stories, but it's all so traumatic I don't want to talk about it. I will, but only in general terms, no names or details that could be recognized. If you know, you know. Went in after a welfare check. They told me I was volunteering, but after a week I said, if I was volunteering, I no longer wanted to be there. A few hours later, I was handed 3 sealed envelopes containing a letter each. No shit. I opened them one after the other, and they were identical, except for the length of time they said I was being involuntarily held for. First one said 3 days, then 3 weeks, and the last one said 6 months. I smelled a shit test, showed the staff I'd opened them laughing, and put them in the bin gently, and walked away laughing. The staff would do things like this to provoke anger, to justify the situation. Like arrange leave to go to a shop, only to confiscate items or just last minute cancel leave, and cancel it 5 days in a row without reason. The place you went, if you were deemed angry for any reason, was filthy. Either a concrete box with a paper piss jug, and paper number 2 bowl wearing a no-tear gown with no windows and a shot of drugs that knocked you out for days, or a pod with feces water on the floor and biting ants, and it was freezing. Telepaths are definitely real, by the way. Craziest thing was my eyes crying blood for days, thinking it was the drug shot in my arse, getting out the pod like a week later and being told it actually happened. All up, I've done a month in solitary and 9 months in the ward over about a 10-year span, bipolar 2 and drug-induced psychosis. Never going back, don't use drugs, not even weed, pray often, and handle the PTSD.
Not paranormal and not necessarily what some would consider a psych ward, but this happened at a place I spent a little over a year at when I was 12 called Brooklawn. I don't think Greentext fits the way I'm going to tell this story, so if you don't want to read me ramble in paragraphs, here's your warning. When I was 12, I was sent to a placement in Louisville called Brooklawn. It is, or was, ran by a company named Euspiritus, until a few years ago. More on that later. There were 2 campuses, Brooklawn, which is where I was, and Bellwood. Now, in the time that I was there, I saw numerous grievances get filed against staff. When a grievance is filed, it has to go up a chain of command, each link deciding whether the matter is dire or just Timmy complaining about not being able to go outside again. Once you filed one, you had to wait for a response from the guy right under the CEO. I never saw any outcome from any grievance. There were definitely rights abuses. Right away after I got there, I was told stories about a guy that hung himself in his closet. Whoever was supposed to be responsible for making sure this guy didn't end himself clearly failed. That wouldn't be the last time somebody would die under that company's supervision. The specific death I'm about to refer to happened while I was there. I was in middle school at the time, so I didn't know the kid personally as he was in high school, but I had friends who were in turn friends with him. So one day on the bus heading back to Bellwood after school, the middle and high schools are located on the Brooklawn campus, this guy wants off and he goes to the door and jumps off into moving traffic and dies. At least that's the official story. There were rumors the day after that the bus monitor had a hold of his wrist while he was about to jump, but she simply let go. Finally, and most recently, a kid was killed while in a restraint. I have countless stories if anybody is interested. Also, PIC-related is my proof that I was actually there. Abby Drain lives on Hillcrest.
Cool story. What else have you got?
Thanks, Anon. First with the paranormal story, then a few odds and ends. We got up to some crazy shit there. One of my friends took the motor out of an RC car and made a tattoo gun. Another successfully, keyword, ran away with his girlfriend for 2 weeks until he called the cops to turn himself in. In one specific incident, I came back in after playing outside and my roommate had used a board from his wardrobe as a chisel to make a hole in the mortar in the cinder block wall so he could talk to the guy on the other side. To answer your question, it's just odds and ends. If I could summarize this into one message, it wouldn't necessarily be about the kids dying. The place shut down and nothing else can be done on that front. Instead, I want to point out the money. It costs about $1,000 a day for a person, and somewhere around 150 residents is about $150,000 per day in revenue for the company. All are medicated. All are there for 3 to 6 months. After all of this is considered, you still have midwits imploring the necessity of therapy and medication.
I just remember that all the staff would stare at me for prolonged periods of time when I was in there. It seemed like their intent was to make me as uncomfortable as possible. It was really strange. I've never seen people act like that anywhere else.
And now psych ward stories from the beginning of X. I got put in a psych ward when I was 17. I told them to let me out, they didn't. So I waited near the door, and when the doctor came, I pushed her down and ran through the hall to the main door. It was a door that you pushed to get out, so I thought I could just run through it. It was locked. My nose got all bloodied from running into the door, and the doctors dragged me back into where I was. I told them not to come near me, but they did, and told me I had to take more medicine. I told them to shut up and let me out. They told me if I didn't cooperate, they would bring the guards in. I told them to fuck off and die. The guards came in, a bunch of big guys, and grabbed me. They threw me onto the bed and pulled down my pants and gave me a shot in the ass. They left after that and locked me in that room. I couldn't stop shaking and fell asleep crying on the floor. I hate psych wards with a passion. Fuckers. I had to meet with a doctor every once in a while in the ward. I told her I was okay, so just let me out, but she wouldn't listen to me. Apparently I wasn't being friendly to other people and was considered a danger. Why the fuck should I be friendly in a place I'm being kept in against my will? Just thinking about it pisses me off.
My bipolar mom was admitted to the ward in the hospital after a bad episode. They have 2 sections. One is completely locked down and pretty damn creepy, as in what you would imagine from watching movies. Walking down the halls past people talking to themselves and banging their heads against the wall. Then there's the other ward that is more laid back, colorful, with a rec room, TV room with sofas, etc. She went in with the police, so being the closest sibling to the hospital, I had to bring her a bag of clothes. The doors were magnetically sealed, so you had to use the phone on the wall to get in. I've never been so aware of everything around me on the 50-feet walk to the nurse's station. Just waiting for someone to jump out of one of the open room doors, but nothing happened. I handed the bag off to the nurse to be checked, and they said I could come back later to see her, so I went to leave. A couple of steps back to the door, I turned to see one of the patients in a robe was walking down the hall as well and staring at the wall. Giving him a confused look, I picked up the pace, and so did he. This time I looked back. He was looking right at me, so I ran to the door. I was thinking, where the hell are the orderlies? As I rushed through the door and slammed it in the guy's face, holding it closed, forgetting about the magnetic lock, and watched as one of the orderlies finally stepped out of one of the rooms and told the guy, "Where are you going? You can't get out that way." I promptly told my family that they could forget about me ever making any more drops to that ward. Follow-up. She was only in that section for about 3 days, then was moved to the more laid-back ward, which I didn't have a problem visiting. Seemed mostly to be drug rehab and in hero-type stuff. Most of the patients were nice and would sit in the TV room with my mom and them and talk. The only depressing part was listening to one young girl talking on one of the phones, begging and crying to her mom that she wanted to come home. They also had cats I got to play with in the crafts room.
Mental hospitals are so boring for the most part. They really screw with your head, though. The nurses and everyone who works at those places seem to be more afraid of you than you are of them, and they seem to be trained to avoid really listening to you and take what you say seriously. They're weird, and everyone treats you like a child. And like I said, it's just a bunch of boring bullshit. They put you even there even if you changed your mind and you act perfectly fine after you try to and hero yourself. I've been in 3. And I regret every single one only because I was bored to tears. It's like prison without the gangs.
I got admitted to a psych ward in Kansas. This was after a night where I ended up smoking some laced Mary Jane, saw lines go across my vision, and ended up throwing a can of pop and my cell phone at a friend. She told me to leave, so I did. The rest I can't remember. But apparently, I went selling invisible vacuums door to door. Police picked me up. I remember this. And I told them I was on acid. I wasn't. Cops took me to the station. Eventually, They take the cuffs off and didn't pay attention to me for a short while. During this time, I ran up some stairs and jumped on top of lockers. Looked down and thought about dropping on the cop and breaking his neck. I didn't. They found me. Then I get sent to a normal hospital. They do their shit, and I get told that I have to be taken to a psych ward. Cue morning. I'm taken to the place by a cop. I sobbed the whole way there, and I was freezing the whole way there. Eventually, I get there. They get me in the ward. I get put on an hero watch, so they take my belt and shoes so I can't hang myself. I was the craziest there the first day. Can't remember half of the first 2 days. Highlights of it were TV talking to me staring at my roommate sleeping and him waking up and telling me to go lay down. I thought about killing him. At various points, I thought I was various people, such as my dad and nephew. At some point, some doctors talked to me and asked me how old I was. I had recently found 4chan. I told them I could be over 9,000. Talked to some dude that looked like Ray Charles. Stole some guy's shirt. Emptied a box of Kleenex in someone's room. Tried escaping. All in all, the first couple of days were fun. The last couple of days sucked because I wasn't psychotic anymore. All in all, being in a ward is scary and boring if you aren't completely batshit insane while you were there. The end of my stay was boring because no one talked to me.
Oh God, when I was in the psych ward, it was so boring. I was there for 5 minutes and I went to take a shower. Because they had me on an hero watch for 3 days before, and I didn't want to shower with someone watching. To get all the charcoal and vomit off of me. And some lady comes walking in and starts having this conversation with me like I'm not naked in the shower. You got a decent temp water for about 3 minutes before it either went ice cold or steaming hot, asking me if I was going to try and hurt myself or anyone else. I'm just like, are you serious? So me and this girl I made friends with asked to get a room together, and they ended up sticking us with this girl who was mentally challenged. She'd run up and down the hallways smacking her head on the walls and door yelling, "Fuck you," and lifting her shirt up. There was also this girl who would bombard the TV room and constantly play some old Austin Powers movie. But yeah, it was pretty lame. I sat around with some crazy guy in the hallways until about 4 a.m. playing Uno and talking. We'd also save up our sleeping meds and the other shit they gave us to relax and trade meds, but they did 15-minute checks, and I didn't want to be stuck in there longer than I had to be if we got caught. Made things interesting. It was a nice vacation from life, though. A very expensive vacation. I had no insurance.
I lived in Faribault, Minnesota. It's a small town where everyone knows everyone. Well, there is an old insane asylum that is now run down. It's boarded up and has been there for years. Teenagers like to go in there and mess around and do drugs. Well, I have been in that place and it's creepy. As I was walking through the tunnel and it leads to the old asylum, well, I was walking through there as I heard screaming. It seemed like it was far away, but it echoed so far. I got to the end of the tunnel. As I walked to the asylum, I was with friends. We all got to the end, even though we heard screams. We were thinking it was the wind. As we started to walk to the asylum, we saw a figure standing at the end of the tunnel, and we looked at it for 2 seconds, and after that it disappeared. So we continued on and went through a hole in the front door. We all got inside and looked around. We were on the main floor when we saw old instruments that were used for the insane years ago. And as we walked around, we entered a room that a guy died in. There was an old newspaper sitting on the ground of the room saying that he was here because of schizophrenia. He had murdered his family and then was placed in the asylum. He was tortured with tools, well, like electric chairs and things like that. He died in 1946. The place was condemned in 1984. We walked towards the room and we started to hear talking, wondering what it was. Well, my friend got attacked and it disappeared. So we kept walking to try and find him, so anyways, we walked into a room for children. There were 20 beds. We walked in there looking for him, still nothing. We heard a noise in the far corner of one of the beds. Someone appeared there. It was a child that was tortured while living there, so we bolted out the door. As we ran outside, we ran into our friend. We asked him where he was, but he said he could not remember. But then after we walked through that tunnel, I had a strange figure following me as I was walking. but after I walked out of the tunnel, it disappeared. Still never went back to that place.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.